Thank you.
Good afternoon. We are going to call the Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority meeting to order. Let the record show our Oregon commissioners, Commissioner Fox, Babbitt, and Polson are present. Commissioner alternate Duvall is online. On the Washington side, we have Commissioner Anderson is present. And alternate Berger is present as well. I have not seen Commissioner Keithler or Gibson, so if somebody sees them pop online, let me know. But we do have a quorum, and we will move on to the agenda. Are there any modifications or changes to the agenda that anyone sees?
You did say there was an email revision sent out that prior to this, so everybody has that.
Okay, with that, I would take a motion to adopt the agenda.
So move. Second.
There's a motion and a second to adopt the agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, we'll move on to our minutes from June 10th, 2024. Did anybody see any issues with our minutes?
That we accept the minutes as presented. If I'm not ahead of the game.
You're good. Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Okay, we have the budget committee meeting from June 10th, 2024. Has everyone had a chance to review those?
Yes.
Okay, I would entertain a motion.
I move that we fix the budget committee meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
There is a motion, a second to adopt the budget committee meeting from June 10th, 2024. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Also let the record show that Commissioner Wilson, or alternate Wilson, is present and seated.
Yeah, Aggie's mom said it was okay. Yeah.
Hi, Misty.
Yeah.
Click on her name. Yeah, she did it.
Thank you, Misty. Okay, we have public comment. Misty, if you'd like to provide public comment for 3 minutes or less. Is there anyone from the public online who would like to provide comment? *6 if you're on your phone, raise your hand or turn your video on. Must not be doing anything wrong yet. Last chance, public comment. Okay, we will close public comment for the day. We will move into the executive reports, co-chairs report. Commissioner Fox, do you have anything?
Yeah, I've got just a couple of observations for everybody. In my opinion, engineering is making really good progress. Both Kiewit and HNTB are finalizing our structure, the number of piers, the material, construction techniques. We're making very good progress there. I've got a few concerns that I wanted to share with everybody that I think we need to kind of keep watching for. The NEPA process, as we change our deck material and structure material type, we've got some modifications to some of the NEPA documentation that we're probably going to have to make. I know we're working through that right now, but that's just an area that I personally want to watch out for. We don't want any bad surprises there. But I think we're making the right decision with the material type and the construction schedule that material type provides for us. Next one is a concern that I've got with the Treaty Tribe MOAs. Other than the Umatilla, it seems like to me we're going glacially slow. And I think we've got to come up with an approach to kind of break some glass and get the discussions moving along at a much more rapid pace. And Mike and I have been talking about means of doing that. And we'll probably offer something up to Federal Highways and ODOT tomorrow in our weekly meeting. Oregon funding is a major concern to me. and I know it is to others, that I think we've got to set a different strategy and we've got to get a lot more aggressive than we are, that appears that we are now. And I think we need to set up a strategy session in the next month or two to really lay out our real plan of attack for the rest of this year and going into 2025. I understand we've got election coming up, but I think we've got to think a little bit out of the box of what could happen there and make sure our bases are covered. Lastly, just a concern, and I'll share this with everybody, but especially the Funding and Budgeting Committee. You know, we're getting close to being able to sign loan agreements with various entities, including Hood River County and Oregon, state of Oregon, and so on. I'm a little concerned that we want to make sure that we're not spending that money too fast before we get the Oregon piece of the funding or the rest of the Washington piece. I just feel like we don't want to get our neck out there too far. It's okay to lean over a little bit, but let's not go so far that if we have a problem, it's not going to be pretty. So that's just a concern I've got. And then lastly, by the end of this year, we've got a new budget that's going to be put together, a new estimate. I'm concerned about the number that's going to pop out. I can already see somewhat of a justification for an increase above the 520, particularly a couple of areas. The foundations on the Oregon side are going to be much deeper than what we thought in the original estimate. We're going to have to be very careful how we build the bridge so we don't hurt the current bridge. Those are my two things that I can see that are definitely going to be cost increases. There's lots of other opportunities for increases too that we're just going to have to really manage and watch.
What do you think the magnitude is going to be?
I wouldn't even guess right now. But it's probably more than 50 million, but I don't know what the number is. Now, as I said, EWIT and HNTB have been doing a lot of good work eliminating numbers of peers, simplifying it. That's going to help offset some of that. But I think there's going to be other cost growth that we're just going to have to be very aggressive and drive back down.
Hand raised by Commissioner Babbitt.
Yeah, Mike, sorry, but you're kind of speaking in code when you're talking about what the engineering team has been working on. Can you fill us in on the specifics of what the changes are that are being considered in terms of materials, piers, et cetera? Last week when you spoke to us, it was, or 2 weeks ago, it was very tentative, and I don't know where things are today.
Yeah, as was reported last time at the
presentation today.
Yeah, there's actually a presentation a little later today that will talk about what's going on in more detail on the bridge as far as piers, materials, and so on. So I think that presentation will go a long ways to bringing you up to speed, Arthur.
I'm happy to wait for that. Thank you for that. And then item number 3, I think, of your, I think you said it was 3 items, but I think there were 6 of them. But item number 3, the Oregon legislature, has anything changed that you see? We do not have a legislature constituted. The leadership is still talking about transportation being the central element for this legislative session. But have you heard something which leads you to believe that we have a problem?
It's a feeling that I have. When we were in Salem, what we heard from a number of folks, that any transportation bill that may occur in 25 would be highly structured to meet maintenance type costs instead of capital. Now, as you know, there's a secondary effort to process a bill to fully fund our particular bridge, but we're out there by ourselves too. So I just see a whole bunch of really open items. And I think we've got to have a more focused approach to what are we going to do, plan A, plan B, plan C, as we go into the late fall and definitely into 25.
So would it be
Uh,
fair, sorry, would it be fair to say that you're looking to do a debrief on your Salem trip?
I didn't hear that.
A debrief on the sale.
Sure. We can do it now or other
No,
time.
I'm not suggesting now, but it sounds like when you're talking about strategic discussion about this, I was wondering what had changed, and I didn't realize that you were referring to what you learned in Salem. So given
Yes.
that, I think that we should have a debrief on it with your subgroup that's involved in that policy.
We can certainly, we'll put something together from the three of us, four of us that were down there and bring it to the next board meeting.
Yeah, and I can fill you in on the transportation discussions at the Association of Oregon Counties meeting this past week. We spoke with our lobbyists also.
All right, I just let the record show that Commissioner Kiefler is present as well online. And we will move into our project director bridge report.
So we covered most of it. Just on the government affairs to continue that, we are getting the government relations plan together, and we will be presenting that to the board. We also, you'll see today, the contract extensions for the 3 lobbyists, in Oregon, Washington, and DC. So we can have some discussion around that. And then we also are planning an event in September 12th and 13th, which is a Thursday and a Friday. So we're still getting all the details of that put together, but that will be an evening event that will include Washington and Oregon legislative members, and then a breakfast on Friday morning centric to the Oregon JTC, and then probably inviting, or will be inviting, Washington specific leadership. And more to come on that. Funding and finance on the bridge investment program. The latest update was that should be going to Congress before the holidays, with an announcement after the holidays. So we may or may not get early information once it goes to Congress. We'll let you know if we hear anything, but we're anticipating that in the next couple of weeks for that bridge investment program to be out. We are still working with FHWA on the agreements for the raise grants. It's in DC under review. They've had a few questions that we've answered. We're anticipating that to be sometime soon that we'll get that raise agreement. And then infra, there's still a number of steps to get the infra agreement finalized. We also, on the Washington state funding, the 10 million additional to the 5 million we've received. We provided some additional updates last week, so I'm hoping that resolved all of their questions, and we'll see something from them this week on the Washington 15 million. Oregon, we're still waiting until next spring when they do their bond sale. We also had a good conversation with Hood River County. Legal counsel is working with them in their legal counsel to work through that. So as soon as they get through the terms and conditions, we'll bring that back as well. The treaty MOAs, you heard about where that was going, so I won't cover any of that. Right away, we are making some progress. We've gotten a map late last week from the contractor on what they need for the port. So we will be taking that, setting up a meeting to go through that with, I think, the E&C committee and reviewing that. I'd like to do that before their next meeting in July. So we'll be setting something up with them to just go through that. And then following up very shortly after that with the port. But we're trying to make sure we don't get ahead of the process. There's steps that we need to take and make sure that everybody kind of understands what the steps are, but we will hopefully in the next month, we'll be communicating that over to the port and getting that relocation process and reimbursement process started with the port. So
So an issue there, when we have the ENC meeting on the land issue there. I'd like, if you would please have Wes there. So he can explain how he's going to use the area. Is he gonna tear up the parking lot? We're gonna have to repave it at the end. What's it gonna do? Those kinds of things.
And the only other thing is with BNSF, we sent that agreement back to them for their preliminary engineering services. So they should be sending it back to us signed, so we're waiting on that. And then we'll have that initial agreement. There's a couple other agreements we have to do as it progresses, but this is the agreement for their review of our design process. So that's it.
I have a question in the chat. It said, remind me of the BIP ask amount.
135 million, sorry, I didn't see that.
And Thomas Parker, it looks like maybe waiting to get in. It isn't. Okay.
Okay. We have any partner updates? Federal Highways, ODOT, WashDOT, stakeholders. They're not on the agenda for later. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone raise their hand. Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
There is a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda.
I'd like to ask one
Discussion?
question.
Yeah.
So did your organization take a look at all of the invoices? And you're okay with them?
Yep.
Okay.
That is the process we have to do for every single invoice. So it comes through
I just want to
that
make
group
sure.
before it comes here.
Okay. Thank you for the update. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion
Aye.
carries. Thank you, Mayor Marlin. Moving on to the engineering and construction report. Mike?
I'll start it off, and Eric, and I don't know if Catherine's on, but jump in.
Okay,
We
never miss much, so. But go ahead.
we had a briefing on the current 3-week schedule, which we very quickly turned it into a briefing on the master schedule. And we made sure that the master schedule will get updated on the board out there. And there will be 2 lines for every activity. The top line will be what the baseline was. And the bottom line will be the current schedule. So you'll be able to see if things are slipping or if things are accelerating on that particular schedule. I believe Drew said that he would have it up on the board later today, earliest tomorrow. So we're going to get in the habit of just looking at it every month, going through it, what is happening, what's sliding around a little bit. It looks like good progress is being made on those activities associated with understanding current conditions and bridge types and so on. We're a little bit behind on some of the softer stuff like the management plans, quality plans and so on, not by much. But you can see the effort's really been pushed on to current conditions, which I think is the right thing to do. There's enough float there that those other documents will get done and it won't hold us up going into phase 1B. We did have some discussion on a budget report for HNTB. They presented the first phase 1A report. I don't know if you've seen it, should have seen it. It's a good start. We made a couple of comments. We talked through it a little bit. And I think there will be some enhancements coming down the road on that. Nothing really to talk too much about the budget report. It's early days. It's 1 month worth of data, but it's getting set up properly. We also mentioned that earned value needs to be incorporated into the report so we know how much money did we plan to spend for this much work, and did that work get done? That's the earned piece of it. So right now you can see expenditures against plan, but the delta really doesn't tell you much. It just says you're spending more or less from the plan. Now, you can look at wage rates, so you can see, hey, we're spending on target, we're underrunning on hours, but we're overrunning on wage rates, or vice versa. So it gives you one layer down to look at. And I know Mike has got a couple of those that he's chasing down to try and get back into alignment.
So just to clarify, the earned value piece is drilling down a layer to look at labor rates, or is it milestone based?
It's actually what the budgeted cost of work performed. So the work that you accomplished, what was the budget for that amount of work?
Mhm.
That's what we're looking for. And then if you look at your actuals, if your actuals are under that number, you're underrunning your budget.
Mhm.
And then you compare that earned value to your plan. Are you ahead of schedule or behind schedule, over or under budget? Then it starts to mean something.
Mhm. So is it calculated at like a percentage of the whatever the line that you're?
Yeah. So in this type of environment, you would say your percent complete of work that you got accomplished against the overall budget is your earned value.
Thanks.
And it's not just percent spent. It's percent earned,
Mhm.
what you accomplished. We were supposed to talk about risk and the school. Sure, we didn't make it through there. We went along on the others. We did have an interesting discussion on ITS, integrated.
Intelligent transportation systems.
Yeah, something like that. It's basically all the computer hardware signaling that you want to come off the bridge, the new bridge. So this fellow, Justin Anderson, is leading that particular process, and he's trying to figure out what's out there now on the old bridge. And then we'll have a discussion about what capability do you want to have on the new bridge. So we suggested that he set up a meeting with Mike, Ryan out at the port to understand how the current bridge, and probably Debbie as well, how the current bridge is structured for that kind of thing. And he's talking about TV cameras and signaling and lots of other stuff. So that was a pretty good discussion. That's what I took away.
I think that was it.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we've got a presentation a little later, so.
Yeah.
We'll give Mike something.
And the report.
All right.
Regarding IT. Yeah, question for you for later regarding ITS. Would he be able to coordinate with ODOT regarding the lights around Button Bridge?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's part of it. And
Also,
also,
often they back up and all sorts of.
And in fact, he even mentioned the communication board on 84.
Yeah.
Being able to tap into that.
Yeah. That's it.
That's the second time I've heard Button Bridge Day and I didn't know what it was. 2.5 hours ago.
But,
Morning,
Yeah.
morning.
yeah, just the timing of those lights backs everything up on the other side of it.
ITS is a good example of where we authority input, because you can make it as big as you want and you can make it as small as you want. And there's probably somewhere in between that's the right answer, but it's a good example of that. There are lots of options when it comes to that.
Yeah, I just imagine the what we decide may cause problems on the freeways or through town, so we might want to consider that with our integration. So.
Okay, any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll move on to the communications and government relations update. Commissioner Keith.
Hi, guys. Well, I think most of the gentlemen that have spoken already pretty much covered the comms and GR update. But to touch on a few things and maybe reinforce a few others, we did have the Facebook Live tolling conversation, which despite some technical glitches at the top that I'm confident won't happen going forward, we did hear good feedback. And Grant, if it hasn't already made its way over to you, there was definitely good input from the community regarding different sub users or groups of users that might want to be considered. And we expressly conveyed that, that will be an element of as we're formulating policy, but I had mentioned it to Ben, and I do want to make sure that that gets over to the Funding and Finance Committee so you guys can determine the best way to integrate or incorporate some of those analyses into the formulas you're working on. We're also working on a comms plan post that tolling conversation to kind of break the video up into a few sound bites that can be shared to communicate kind of some of the key points or takeaways, just knowing now that a lot of that information, specifically the slide that was not only in our last meeting, but also in that Facebook Live about a known scenario of a toll rate currently is out there with context so that we try to make sure people are informed as we get more into that part of the conversation. Grant, I'm recalling actually, you probably don't need anyone to send you that stuff because you were on the call. So hopefully you've got that list of the different users that were flagged. I don't know if you want to talk about it now, but I kind of also defer to trusting that you and your committee can determine how you want that input to get factored in and then come back to the larger group.
I don't have that particular list because my hands were full at the time. If you could send me that list, that'd be great.
You mean all of us parents don't get that natural ability upon procreating where we just retain all these different mental lists and can quickly recall them?
I think I have all that list in my mind. I just want to make sure I don't miss anything either.
Awesome. Then yeah,
So-
I'll definitely send it along because like I said, it had been in my head afterwards of just wanting to get something in writing. So I'll make sure to get that over to you. And then I think just to touch on some of the points earlier and just to reassure this whole group and maybe remind all of us that our first thing upon forming the authority was extensive work together to determine the best way to delegate areas of focus. And we did create these subcommittees, and the Government Relations and Communications Committee is indeed working on the various scenarios for how we will effectively pursue the strategies that we need for success, not only in Oregon, but also Washington and still at the federal level. Obviously, some of that calls attention to an action item today, which is renewing the contracts we currently have for the support. But I do say that I trust the professionals that we have, not only in consultant form, but also on staff and the leadership of the commissioners that serve alongside me on that committee to bring back to you guys as appropriate a fuller strategy. And I'd welcome any commissioner that's here that has thoughts or wants to make sure that things are being considered as we work on those scenarios. Feel free to reach out to me, but I do think we need to just reinforce a shared trust that these different groups that are handling engineering and finance and also comms, which is a professional endeavor as well, are given that ability to workshop things so that we make the best use of when something comes to the full board, and that we hear very loud and clear that our main focus is make sure that we are on track and supporting our shared goal of getting the necessary funding to keep this project going. So I think those are my updates.
Any questions? Seeing any? Thank you very much, Commissioner Keeler. Okay, we will move on to new business. WashDOT review of the reimbursement agreement.
Yep, so this is in your packet, as we move into plans production and we start to engage WashDOT in the review of materials. There is a reimbursement agreement for their time. So that's what this is. It's got a current not to exceed of 60,000. That is for the full design review process. So not only phase 1A, but 1B. It's their estimation of amount of time that they'll need. But again, it's kind of a T&M in the sense that it'd be how much we ask them to do. It's not like a lump sum or anything like that, but it covers, some reimbursement for them and those reviews of the plan.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none.
Yeah, this is Martin Fuse with WashDOT. I just wanted to reiterate that is not a lump sum, and it'll just be charged as we use it.
Thank you, Martin.
I move we approve the Washington State DOT review reimbursement agreement for a not to exceed amount of $60,000.
Second. There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries. Okay, we have the budget review and adoption resolution 2024-7.
Is Debbie on? Yeah.
I
Okay.
am on, yes.
Perfect. Great.
And hopefully
Okay,
I don't
working.
sound like a chipmunk today.
You do not.
You're good.
Okay, sorry I couldn't be there in person. I have this horrible cough. I was sick a couple of weeks ago and I have this lingering cough that's terrible. And so I didn't want to cough all over everybody. So basically, we just need to carry on with the whole budget process, which in Oregon, first off, you need to open a public hearing. And so you do need to have a public hearing and give people an opportunity to talk about the proposed budget, which again is for one.
And we lost her.
It's like a 1-year snapshot out of the whole project.
So-
So not super helpful for management purposes, but required under Oregon budget law. So Jake, do you mind opening a public hearing and then seeing if there's any comment? I realized after the fact that it was not actually on the agenda. So if we could just do that, see if anybody wants to comment on the budget, then you can close the public hearing and we can move on.
I just have a procedural question. Is there in Oregon state law noticing requirements for this type of public hearing?
Yes, and those were done.
So we just didn't have it on today's agenda, but it was noticed to occur today?
Yes, yep, it was in the paper last week, which is within the timeline requirements under Oregon law.
Okay. With that, and I don't see any issues with any of my seatmates here. Okay, with that, we will open a public hearing to review the 2024-2025 budget and take public testimony. Is there, and I don't have a sheet.
Is there anyone from the public who wishes? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the actual, okay. Is there anyone from the public that is online who would like to provide testimony? Is there anyone from the public online who would like to provide testimony? I'm not seeing anyone. And did we get any testimony, written testimony on the budget?
I have not received any, no.
Okay. Being that there's been no written or oral testimony, I will close this public hearing and reopen the meeting for discussion by the board. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
I move we adopt fiscal year 2024-25 budget resolution 2024-7.
Second.
There is a motion and a second to adopt resolution 2024-7. Any discussion? I'm not seeing any. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. All right, we'll move on to the lobbyist contract resolution 2024-8 and -9 and 10.
Sure, we had three contracts on the Port of the River to do the general government relations for the project, and it's expiring in at the end of the June, and as we have a bridge authority as a contracting agency, we had procured three contracts again, and for the intermediate procurement rule for Hood River County, we have solicited informally for the quote from qualified firms and selected three firms as a most qualified firm, and we went to negotiation, and then three firms have come to the budget to do the work for 2025 sessions, and we also include the option to extend the contract 2 times for each extension will be 1 year term, so we don't have to do this procurement every year. And we determined that this procurement was for the rule, and then for the competitive environment to solicit the best qualified firm. So it is included in 3 different resolutions. One for the federal government is Summit Strategy Group, and then for Washington State, it's a Oswald Consulting, and for Oregon, it's a Firm Run Partners.
Then question for you. We got a revised agenda. The only revision was for the amount for Thorn Run, right?
Correct. So there was a mistake in the calculation.
Yeah.
$100.
Yeah, I didn't see any other changes to the verbiage, anything else, only the amount. Yeah.
So the next time we'll have to do a procurement is 2027. What I hear?
26.
What it does is it, instead of having to go out and do a full procurement, getting other proposers, it allows you to continue with their services, renegotiating every year, or you can stop on any one of them. It just, we don't have to go do the whole process of reaching out to multiple firms and all that. So it allows you for continuity. Yeah, a little flexibility. Every 3 years, you'll have to do the full process.
So we have options to extend the 1 year, and we can do it twice.
Another silly question. Why are some things resolutions and other things are just your name?
We had a whole conversation about that.
Okay, we can do that later. I'm sure
There's a definition in the bylaws. And I think examples maybe from the bylaws.
I knew I was going to read that.
I can fill you in. A resolution is a memorialization of motion. It's simply reducing a motion to a written form.
Does that help?
It helps historically to give context.
Through my head.
I mean, I would say like, it's a great question. And where I've wrapped my head around it or found it helpful is when you're trying to research an issue. So as the life of this authority grows, they can look back now and see through the resolution, the mindset or the context for why that decision was made. And as I've uncovered many things up to 100 years old, it is indeed helpful to be able to have a resolution and understand what they were thinking and why they did something.
We do have a tracker for all resolutions as well as actually the motions, at least for this first year. That you can go back and research. So the motions may not carry on in tracker form completely, but the first few years, yes.
Just go to the Sesame Street song and there's a bill and then
yeah, exactly.
Okay. Sorry, thank you for indulging.
Okay,
Looking for a motion.
you're gonna give it to us now.
I would recommend we approve resolution 24-8, 9, and 10 for lobbyist contracts.
There's a motion and a second to adopt the lobbyist contracts. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. All right, we'll move on. We are running through time. Bridge options.
All right. Can you pull up the presentation?
I can.
So Amy's pulling up a short presentation, just kind of walks us through the material type selection that we did. And kind of value engineering decision on which bridge type to move forward with. Go ahead to the next one.
So many mouses.
Yeah. So we'll talk about the bridge alternatives and then we'll go through what we're going to continue to look at as far as optimization of that alternative.
Right.
So when we originally had started, we had asked Kiewit to take a look at the original preferred alternative that came out in NEPA, which was a concrete segmental, and see if there was any reason to look at other bridge types. So they did that. They took a look at other bridge types, and what they came back with, they looked at really three. They looked at the segmental bridge, they looked at a hybrid option, and then they looked at a steel structure. What you see on the bottom is the steel structure that they looked at, and that actually came out as the recommended structure that we move forward with. And we'll talk about, go ahead to the next one, a little bit of why.
But that top option is kind of the base option.
That is the
Concrete.
preferred alternative out of the NEPA document. So that was our base, what we started with, what PCE was based on, what NEPA documents were based on. That was that top option. And we'll flip back to that in just a second. But here's just some pros and cons of, the segmental. It didn't require as heavy of the segments to be lifted because they are smaller pieces, but there is more of them. So it would require more lifts, which opens you up to more weather conditions and wind conditions that you would have because you have more lifts. There was limited revisions to the environmental because that was the preferred alternative that was in the NEPA documents. And then, durability of concrete segmental has proven to be pretty, well over time. Some of the cons was the construction in the cold and windy weather and trying to pour concrete and do more concrete work in those weather conditions is a negative for sure. It was a longer duration than steel, and we'll talk about that in a second. And just more man hours because of that, and more inner water work because it was just a longer construction period. So on the steel, one of the big benefits was its faster construction. There was almost a year less in construction for the steel. It was kind of related to an erector set, right? You bring out a metal piece, you bolt it in place, you move to the next one. It's all kind of rinse and repeat. Less labor on site because a lot of the work is being done off site at prefabricated areas. So weather conditions can be more favorable there than they would be here. And luckily we're in an area that has 4 rather large steel fabricators in the Portland area. One of them does major barges. One of them does ships. So there's 4 of them that are all capable. Kiewit has visited 1 or 2 of them. They were telling us a little bit about the one that they visited last week. Gunderson, major builder, has a humongous facility. They said slightly different what they do every day, but they said it'd be a great opportunity. They'd love to do the work. They're right on the Willamette. So all of that just goes to, getting a competitive steel price, which really has helped to, make steel a more attractive option, and the faster construction. So the challenge is again, you still have the winds when you do have to bring segments in. There'll be heavy segments that they need to bring in. So those are potential challenges. And then, the potential variability in steel prices. That's always a concern, but that same concern exists, I think, with any material that we see. In the conversations they've had with the manufacturers, they see the pricing becoming more stable, and that we're coming out of some of that crazy variations that we've seen over the last 4 years. And they see that being a more consistent future, but, nobody really knows for sure, but everybody's seeing that being a leveling off.
It's not taking off and going up.
It's not going up, and they don't, there's nothing in the horizon right now that says that it's going to. So they're confident that it'll be a more consistent number. So go ahead to the next one. So can you scroll up all the way?
Working on it. Sorry.
All right, perfect. So some of the things that they're looking at optimizing is the number of in-water piers. Right now, they believe they can cut 2 to 3 piers from the preferred NEPA alternative. So instead of having 13, they're down around the 10 piers number. They're still doing some refinement to figure out exactly. But they definitely see an opportunity to reduce the number of piers, which also helps with in-water work, impacts to the environment, all of the, a lot of positives in not having more than, more piers.
Asking if they're the same size.
They relatively, I would say yes. So the steel portions would be roughly 20 to 25 at the haunches above the piers, and then it would go into a parabolic narrowing in between the piers. So it'll be a similar look to what you would see with the concrete segmental, which is that arch look. It'll still maintain that. So that generally that will still be the same. There was one option.
In the water.
The piers in the water are going to be relatively the same size because they are making bigger spans. That's how they're reducing the number of piers. So instead of 300-foot spans, they're looking at more like 500-foot spans. So that's where, but that means bigger foundations. But when they look at the foundations, there's a few different things that drive that. It's the weight of the superstructure, the vessel impact, as well as seismic. And there's kind of, if you line all of those things up, there's kind of an ideal place where those all cross, where you optimize your structure based on that. So that's what they're trying to do right now, is to optimize vessel impact versus seismic versus size of the structure, span length, and get that optimal structure.
And the steel structure is substantially lighter than a cast iron.
Yes, and the steel will be lighter than the concrete structure. The difference is you're picking up 14-foot segments of concrete and putting in little blocks every time for the precast concrete, where steel, you're going to pick up, 200, 300-foot segments at a time and put them in place. So much bigger, smaller, smaller number of lifts, but bigger size and weight.
But that by itself, there's construction nowadays, it's incredibly big things up.
And Kiewit has the fleet to handle that kind of work. I mean, this is what they do. That's part of the benefit, is they have a big marine division out of Vancouver, and they are very familiar with lifting and building structures like this. So
Edwards has his hand up.
I'm sorry,
Commissioner Edwards, question.
Yeah, non-engineer here. Would the steel potentially increase freezing the deck and causing issues for traveling?
Say that one more time, please.
The travel deck freezing.
There will be
No,
concrete on top of the steel.
yeah,
there'll be a concrete deck that spans across the steel. And the difference of freezing surface temperature between the two options is no big deal.
a big difference. Does that answer your question, Jake?
And still raised.
Are you on mute?
Yeah, it shows that he's muted. I'm not seeing. Arthur, can you hear us? Yep, Arthur, we're still online. Okay. Thank you, Jake.
All right. Well, jump in, Jake, if you get your audio back. They are looking at, we're having a conversation with Tree Fishing Access Site about potentially putting a foundation within that area. That just allows for a little shorter spans on the Washington side, which allows for efficiency and the use of the pre-stressed girders. It will just depend on how that goes with the conversations with the Tree Fishing Access Site. So,
but there is an option if we can't get that access, we can stand right over the top of it.
correct. So we can do either. This was just, again, one of those optimizations that we wanted to investigate. And then, as we said, they're continuing to optimize as they just refine their models and refine their data, get more existing information. They can just continue to refine that. So they'll continue to do that, which was what phase 1A was set up for. So as they finish up their existing conditions, as they start to define their design criteria, they'll continue to refine that alternative. As far as the NEPA process, we did take a look at the difference between the potential need for a reevaluation versus a supplemental agreement. Very similar in process. The supplemental agreement requires a little additional outreach. And what they looked at on the schedule is it's about a 4-month difference between the two. So it's not a horrible distance. If we can make that decision and we have to get started, then we can get that process started if that's the one we need to do. They are working with ODOT and FHWA to make the decision on whether a reeval or a supplemental is the right approach. So we're looking to have that decision, I would say, in the next month. And then we'll get started right away on whichever one we have to go through. But although some impact, I don't think it's going to be a significant impact to the construction if we had to go supplemental versus reeval. But it would be a cleaner process if we did the reevaluation.
Well, the kind of an input there, trying to get that decision earlier is better in that there's kind of a reeval update going on right now.
And there, yeah.
So if we can update it with the new approach, that saves us at least a month right there.
Right. So what we would do on the reeval, and one of the reasons would be a little shorter, is we would try to go ahead and incorporate this with that reeval that we're already doing in order to take advantage of having already started that reeval process. All right, go to. Okay, so go back to the very beginning. And I just bring this back up as you can see here, the original at the top and then the bottom, which is the steel. You can see the difference in the number of piers, but the general shape, as you can see, is very similar between the two. Not a lot of difference there. Honestly, if I took everything else off you in this week, somewhat reality, you wouldn't really notice the difference other than one will be gray and one will be most likely weathering steel brown, which is something we heard from the aesthetics committee when we talked about this was whatever material you use, leave it in it, use it in its native form. So that's what we tried to do with, very little difference really between the two other than minimizing the number of piers in the water. Profile would stay the same, horizontal would stay the same, cross sections across the bridge would be the same.
So for maintenance, as long as we're using weathered steel in its natural habitat, if you will, we don't have to paint it.
Correct.
Other than perhaps the splice joints, just to keep it covered.
Yeah, correct.
So the support spacing without the segment divider that you have in the concrete, I think is very. I'm gonna point here because I can't articulate myself. But you have this is it's a segment, right? Segment, and you've got those segment supports. Not having those distorting that kind of natural flow of the bridge, I think is a strong.
And personally, I think the one on the bottom is much more elegant than the one on the top.
Yeah, the one at the bottom, and what Eric was pointing out on the screen is that two kind of middle piers that mess up the uniformity of the segmental piece would be gone. So there's more uniform look to the steel than the concrete.
And then what I didn't really understand is the cast in place and the discussion of getting into the tribal fishing.
So on the right-hand side of the screen, and this shows the option, you see between piers 9 and 10, there's the tribal fishing area there on the bottom, and right now we're spanning across it. If we were able to put intermediate piers in there, it would shorten that span and allow you to go to a different beam type on that very end, which would allow for those span 9 and 10, span 9 and span 10 to be a different type of structure that would be a more efficient structure, which basically just allows us to get over the railroad, over the tribal fishing area and out into the bigger spans in a little more efficient way.
But we would be landing in the tribal.
You'd have one pier in the,
So
so
we wouldn't
there'd be one permanent impact in the treaty fishing
And
access.
it's right at the corner of it.
This is actually span. I didn't realize that it goes from water all the way across the.
And it goes all the way across the railroad tracks.
Yeah.
So it's those last couple are very long spans, and if they're, because they're on rock and the way the rock comes up on the Washington side, if we can put those in, there's some opportunity to refine that area, just to make it a more efficient structure on it.
That could be the most challenging pick, is that one there, I would think.
You might have to ground your barge to do it.
Yeah.
That 475-foot span for those last three spans is. It's impressive. Yeah. But I like the idea that, I like the way that it makes it really consistent from side to side.
And that's what they're looking. I mean, you start getting into 500-foot spans, you start pushing the limits of steel. So they're really refining that now, and that's what we'll see over the next few months, is that continued, refinement.
So in that parabolic, from where they come out of the water, what's the depth between the concrete segmental and the steel in terms of when it comes to the center of the span? The difference? Is the concrete thicker?
I mean, the height of the material where the big span is?
Yeah, between, where as you increase your length, you're gonna have deeper joints. So how deep is that comparatively?
At the widest span, actually, they were about the same. So it was roughly around 25 feet.
25 feet. Yeah. And then what out in the middle of it? How about close?
20 feet, wasn't it?
Yeah, it gets, as your spans get smaller, they'll get thinner, but because they've maximized the span length and tried to make it more uniform towards the 500 foot, you'll keep that thickness as they move out. And it's about the same for the concrete, because the concrete previously was going to get slightly smaller, I think down to 15 feet on the ends. But still will stay a little more consistent.
I guess, so we've got 25 feet on the pier, but in the center of.
Oh, in between the two piers? Oh, sorry. I think it was around 12 to 14 feet.
Okay. So it's got
about a 10-foot difference on the parabolic.
Yeah. Okay.
Is there a cost difference between the painting steel bridge versus doing weathered steel?
Both in initial and in maintenance, yes.
The weathered is cheaper, or the weathered's more expensive?
It will be cheaper long term.
Yeah, but capital wise, it's a little more expensive.
Yeah. A little more upfront, a little longer, a little cheaper long term. Painting is probably a little cheaper upfront and a little more often you have to go out and do it.
Painting you got to do every 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And gets realistic.
You got to recoat it 4 times.
Yeah. And painting over a national scenic area, waterway sensitive, is you're going to have all them.
The environment.
That would be all done by articulated trucks, reaching up underneath, which we're probably going to have to buy anyway.
Yeah, for inspections and other things, you'll probably rent it out or lease it out or something. So most bridge inspection companies will bring their own.
Get down the road.
Let's get it built first.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think what we needed from the board was commission was to, approval to just continue with the steel option, and have Kiewit focus on that option going forward.
A motion or
Agreement, just acknowledgement, okay, thumbs up.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Arthur.
So I was listening to a podcast about weathered steel bridges, and they were explaining that it's not like this material is impervious to rust and water damage, that it still has to be designed in such a way that that the joints are allowed to be drained and that water doesn't pool, and that design errors can have in the past caused bridge collapses and that sort of thing. Can someone who knows more than I do, more than just watching one podcast, comment on that?
We can bring somebody in to do that for you, is what I'd tell you. I'm not the person to do that. And I don't know that we have anybody on. Unless Scott, is Scott on? I don't know if Scott feels comfortable.
We definitely have experts that.
Well, yeah, I absolutely can bring somebody in that can do that if you want to.
But weathered steel typically against painted steel, weathered steel has built into the design a little thicker material that allows it to degrade or rust off, if you will. And the only area you really got to be careful of is the joints.
Yeah.
Where you have a splice joint or any kind of joint. Most of that's weathered steel anyway, but you want to keep it coated. So we would have to coat it every 5-10 years.
Yeah. So Arthur, when you went across the New River Gorge Bridge in West Virginia on your trip, that was a weathered steel bridge.
Yeah.
It was built in the 70s.
The podcast I was watching was talking about the collapse in Pittsburgh of that, the one that Biden was going to visit the week before it or the week after it collapsed. Wow. So hopefully someone can comment on, just let me understand kind of what I understand the costs and the fact that it's cheaper long-term to maintain. I just want to get some feeling, there's still some maintenance necessary compared to concrete, and I want to learn more about that.
Okay.
Scott.
I think I would throw out as well, Arthur, that on holding water and that sort of thing on joints and detailing is going to be the same with a painted bridge as it is with the steel bridge, with the Core-10 bridge. So
we're still going to have that problem on the deck.
Yeah, I was talking about compared to concrete.
Okay. Scott, you've got your hand up. Do you have answers?
I will just briefly. Yes, you're absolutely correct. There are differences between a painted steel bridge and how you approach a weathering steel bridge. There are fairly extensive design guidelines that have been developed for detailing, and specifically for those reasons, to avoid locations where you have water ponding, etc. And those items are things that we'll be certainly looking for from a review standpoint, and working with the Kiewit designers to make sure that they're following those guides and achieving the appropriate design, the appropriate design details to minimize that potential.
Thank you.
Okay. Further discussion on these. This is a very, very big decision. We've had a fair amount of discussion, but I want to make sure everyone's had a chance to speak. And if no one has anything else, Mike, would you want to make a motion that we move forward?
I would move that we proceed with what we call here alternate 2, which is the steel span approach to our bridge. And at this time, we stop work no further on the put in place concrete cantilevered design that was part of the base design. We moved to the steel instead.
Second.
There is a motion and a second to move forward with alternative 2, the steel. Is there any further discussion? I'm not hearing any. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Marla, are you there? I know you went mobile. Probably picking up kids right now, but that is that's enough.
How about Arthur? Did Arthur say yeah?
Arthur?
I did. I put my thumb up. I thought you guys could see me. I'm going to put the
We
link.
don't have the visual on the screen for all the faces.
I put the link in the chat of that podcast that I was referring to.
Thank you.
Yeah. And just for us lay people, when we are referring about weathering steel, it's just the term weathering is just the name. It's a chemical reaction that is actually less resistant to weathering and rusting, not more. So that's only a name. Arose by any other name smells just as sweet.
And it may be helpful to note that we checked with Salmon Safe.
Yeah.
And they fully support a quote weathered steel approach.
Yeah. What it does is it treats the steel so it rusts, quote unquote, well, it does rust, but to a point where it kind of stops rusting. It stops deteriorating to as much of an extent as people think when you talk about weathering. So it's a way to protect the bridge more than other modes of weathering. So just so everybody understands, when we're talking about weathered steel, it's not weathered in the traditional sense of rusting and deteriorating. So
Precondition.
sure, pre-treated.
Similar to some of our
Season.
fancy new buildings in White Salmon.
Seasons like a cast iron skillet. Yeah.
Oxidized protection.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, motion carries.
Yes.
All right, we'll move on to our informational items, Hood River County loan.
We talked about this, no really other update other than legal counsel is working with the county legal counsel, and when we get something back from them, we'll bring it back to the board.
And to address Commissioner Fox's earlier concern, we don't hold money unless we need it and is authorized to do so amongst consent of all of us. So we're not extending ourselves or doing anything or leveraging ourselves unless we choose to do so.
Yeah, I
Yep.
didn't say that, we weren't going to do that. I'm just saying
I know.
Commissioner Fox has a little bit of uneasiness about this thing.
Yep, we can't do it without you also
Yep.
saying so.
We get it.
Okay,
We get it.
Commissioner Babbitts, I see your hand up.
Yeah, just real briefly, I am going to be stepping back from this particular one because I'm not sure how to separate my responsibility to Hood River County from my responsibility to the Bridge Authority, and you have plenty of qualified people who can take my place.
Thank you very much for that clarification, Commissioner Babbitts. Okay, any other? His hand's been up for a long time.
There we go.
I thought it was just stuck, but okay, upcoming action items. Anything to review on here? Okay, we have a grant scope overview sometime in the future. I'll give announcements that there will be staff at the Hood River First Friday on 9/6/2024 from 4:30 to 8:30. We will be at the Huckleberry Festival on 9/7. We don't know what time, and we'll also be at El Gringo, the Spanish language event from 3:30 to 8:30 on 9/17. And the Bridge Centennial Celebration at the Port of Hood River Marina Green on 10/6/2024. Our next regularly scheduled meeting will be Monday, July 8th, 2024 from 2 to 4 here and online. And with that, I would open it up for a roundtable from any of my commissioners or alternates.
This Wednesday, Ron Wyden's having a town hall that I will be at.
Okay,
I'll attend that as well.
great. Anything else for the good of the order?
I thought we would also be going to the first Friday in July in Hood River. Is that not on the schedule?
I only see on the upcoming community events, we've got 9/6. I don't see Anna. Oh, there's Anna. Hi, Anna.
Hello. Yeah, I'm sorry. That was originally on the calendar, and due to scheduling, we had to cancel that. And so we're still doing, I think the plan was always to do like 4 events. And so these are the 4 we're going to do. Thanks for the question.
Okay. Any other questions or roundtable comments? With that, I will say this might be almost the earliest we've ever gotten done. And with that and the consent to the governed, thank you very much, Arthur, for the explosion in the background. We will adjourn this meeting at 3:10.